Hi guys, hope wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you're having a super sensational day. Today we're discussing iron deficiency in children with expert tips how to prevent it, in particular for children who choose to become vegetarian, with our special guest, Sarah Smith, founder and dietitian from Bayside Dietetics. Now, iron is a vital dietary mineral that involves a range of bodily functions, including the transportation of oxygen in the blood. It's essential in providing energy for daily life and also vital in brain development. Babies, toddlers, preschoolers and teenagers are at higher risk of iron deficiency, mainly due to increased iron needs during their rapid growth periods. Without intervention, a child whose diet does not provide them with enough iron will eventually develop iron deficiency anemia. Coupled with this, we're actually starting to see a shift in consciousness as more children actually choosing to become vegetarian. If it's done right, a meat-free diet can actually be a good choice for adolescents, especially considering that vegetarians often eat more vegetables and fruits that most children sort of refuse to. So as mentioned before, we're speaking with Sarah Smith. She's founder and managing director of Bayside Dietetics. And we're speaking to her today how we can actually prevent children from becoming iron deficient. Now, Sarah works in a private practice in Bayside, Melbourne, after working for an extensive period with the Monash Children's Hospital. Sarah thrives on helping children and their families work towards a freedom from the limits of food concerns, reactions, and difficulties. How you doing, Sarah?
Well, thanks, Rachel. Thanks for that comprehensive introduction.
Yeah. Now, we've published your article, does your child need this fatigue fix? In the article, it's a great article, and you mentioned it's certainly not to discourage vegetarian eating, but to ensure that it's done appropriately and to ensure that the body continues to work at its best. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the article and what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, sure. It's something, iron deficiency, that is so preventable and so manageable that giving people a little bit of information through the blog, I think, it sort of triggers off to help people. Because if you are low in iron, or your child's low in iron, and you fix it, they just go from feeling tired and yucky to feeling wonderful again. So it's such an easy thing to manage. And so just keeping the awareness up to make sure people are looking out for it in their child.
And so with your practice and in all of your years experience, are you seeing with your clients that you're seeing an increase in children who are choosing to become vegetarian and an increase in iron deficiency as a trend, I would say?
Yeah, I wouldn't have any numbers, but certainly on a personal level in my practice, I am seeing a lot more. A lot of teenagers with a deliberate choice to become vegetarian, as you were saying. And I think the parents have got the awareness to say, well, if my child's going to do that, I want to make sure it's done properly. So how do we go about it? And then to that similar sort of awareness from parents of toddlers who aren't, I suppose, making the ethical choice, but they are refusing meat for whatever reason. So sort of meat avoiders. And again, the parents being aware of saying, hang on, there's probably an impact of this. How do I manage this and look after my child?
Yeah. Now, you speak in the article about vegetarian iron. This is something interesting. Can you tell us a little bit what you mean by that?
Yeah, in the way humans take in iron, you can categorise them into two very distinct groups. You've got your meat form of irons, which humans deal really well with, and then you've got your non-meat forms of iron, which I've referred to as vegetarian iron, which humans have a little bit more trouble absorbing, so get a little bit more difficulty. So they're really worth seeing as two separate types of iron. Technically, you call them heme iron from meat and non-heme iron. So if anyone's heard of that, that's what they're talking about. But meat and vegetarian iron are probably the most user-friendly way of saying it, I think.
Yeah, and you also mentioned the article that when a child, especially adolescents, as you like you were just mentioning, that if their diet had previously sort of had meat in it, and then they've chosen to make the change to become vegetarian, that their bodies can actually go through a bit of difficulty in trying to absorb the iron from the vegetarian iron. Could you speak a little bit about that? Because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to think of it is that in the vegetarian forms of iron, the iron is sort of almost caught up in all the fibers that's in the meal at the same time. And so some of these are getting in the way of the iron actually getting out of the food. And then iron in the body is probably one of the most precious things. Conditions have to be right for it to be absorbed well.
Wow.
Other nutrients are sort of quite resilient and they'll get absorbed no matter what, but iron has to have the right conditions. So if it's sort of caught up in a few fibers and it's not quite right environment for it, it'll just pass all the way through the gut and come out the other end. So sometimes you hear of all these beautiful vegetarian forms of iron, but if it's not taken in the right way, then it just comes out the other end and you don't get the benefit for having it in the iron.
And you mentioned also in the article that when taking in iron, that vitamin C, is that right? Is that helps with the absorption of iron? Is that correct?
Spot on. Yeah, that's one of the things that will help remove the iron from the mesh of the food and turn it
Cool.
into a form that actually gets really well absorbed. So it certainly is a really helpful thing to be conscious of as well.
And to so is that for example like having a glass of say orange juice with a meal? Would that sort of help, or like how do you suggest is the best way?
For sure. Yeah, I think definitely there's a whole lot of vitamin C in fruit juice. If you're not already having fruit juice, then there's other ways to do it without adding juice to the diet. So just a squeeze of lemon onto the food, a wedge of
Oh,
orange with a meal. Yeah,
that's
you could just
awesome.
cut up an orange and have run for a segment. Yeah, you could do it in some other forms of food. Something like berries are quite high in vitamin C, so any of the berries on breakfast cereal works quite well. Lunchtime, things like tomato is quite high, so tomato in a sandwich or on a salad. And at dinner time, you've got things like capsicum and broccoli that are quite high in vitamin C as well. So having some of the vitamin C rich veggies on a plate is helpful too.
God, that's great advice. Thanks for that. I'm going to start doing that myself as well. Now, you also mentioned in the article that iron supplements have side effects for children that aren't really sort of worth putting them through unless they're truly low in iron. And more importantly, that too much iron can actually be toxic for their small little bodies. Can you tell us a little more about this?
Yeah. So the very rare but more dangerous part of that is that you do hold on to iron. So if you have too much and your body absorbs too much, then it has trouble getting rid of it and it can build up. Now
Right.
that's very rare, but it certainly means that it's not worth taking iron tablets unless you actually really need to have them. But the other much more common and really relevant side effect from iron supplements is they're quite harsh on the gut. So a lot of kids that are having iron supplements will start to get a lot of tummy pains or constipation and sometimes diarrhea as well.
Wow. Okay. So this is, and as you said, in your practice, you will only, suggest that if the child is really, really low in iron. It's just as an initial top up, is it? Is that what you,
Exactly right. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
If it's quite hard to get it from the diet, so if someone is low, then you need some sort of booster at the start to bring up levels initially. And so some of those side effects, sure, they're not pleasant, but they're worthwhile going through. We talk about strategies to manage that as well at the same time. But it's the side effects are worth it for somebody who is low, where it's not worth putting a child through that if they're not low in the first place.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've got lots to chat about. So let's get stuck into the questions. Question number one, how does a low iron level make children feel?
So your intro was brilliant because it went through a lot of the role of iron, the big one being the transporting oxygen around your body. Now your body's got a range of iron in it, and it's got a small capacity to drop off slightly, and for the child not to feel any difference. But if the drop off in iron level is quite significant, we call it anaemia. And by the time you get to those kinds of levels, your child is feeling pretty tired by that time. So the oxygen's not getting to their muscles. They might be feeling tired during sport, or when they finish their regular sport, they're feeling more tired than normal. It might be just general fatigue. It might be more fatigue in more of the brain, so trouble concentrating and sticking to a task or at school. And then parents will often notice, I find, come in and tell me that they notice the child's really quite pale, or their child's complaining of dizziness. So they're the key ones that that show up. And again, in your intro was great because it covered off the high risk periods too. So you're looking for those symptoms, particularly in kids that are going through a bit of a growth spurt when their needs are a little bit higher, or kids that have changed their diet to take meat out of it.
Yeah. And what about infections? Would children be more, I can't say the word, susceptible to repeat infections at all?
Yes, spot on. You're quite right. So iron's got a role in that role as well. So definitely, they're more susceptible and may take a little bit longer to recover from infections too.
And a loss in appetite, is that something that you've seen much of before?
I would say, yeah, it certainly can come along too, and a lot of varied causes for that one as well. So I'm not going to, I wouldn't necessarily link that one to iron in particular, but it certainly could be part of the package for sure. Yeah, child gets tired, put off a lot of things and loses joy in lots of different activities, and 100% that food might be one of it.
Yeah, and another thing like strange food cravings. I was reading earlier on that some children actually even like to eat dirt. Have you ever? I mean, that would maybe be a little bit younger, but is that something that you've seen or heard of before at all?
It's interesting that you do tend to, if you get the opportunity to listen to what the body really says, that there are some really strong signals that come from the body to drive intake of certain nutrients.
Yeah.
I've never had a client myself that's come and had those stories of anything really random, but certainly do talk about, that sort of drive for foods they haven't wanted to eat before.
So main things I guess parents have to look for in their children is change in behavioural problems, loss of potential loss of appetite, but for them being much more tired, and you were saying before the change in the colour of the skin. Would they be the main ones?
Yeah, spot on. Yeah. Tiredness and paleness. Yeah, spot on.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So question number 2. Let's get stuck into that. Now, what are the main sources of iron in a child's diet?
So Australian diet, in Australia, we're lucky. We do surveys of how people eat and where the nutrients in people's diets come from. So we get a bit of an idea about what the best sources are. So with iron, it still sticks with the best sources being your meats. So your red meats, your beef and your lamb. And that's why we talk about the difference, the vegetarian diet being so different, because you won't have those really good sources. Next on the list would be your white meat, so pork and then chicken. Fish has got some too. Your redder fish is having more than your white fish, so salmon or tuna are a bit higher than your white. Then, interestingly enough, in the Aussie diet, the next highest contributor is your iron fortified breakfast cereals. So I've got one with me.
Oh, look at you, girlfriend. You're going to prepare earlier.
I have prepared earlier. So this is not brand specific. There's a lot of cereals in Australia out there that are iron fortified, but I'll show you how you can tell. If you flick to the ingredients list on a cereal box, it's always listed in order from the highest ingredient to the lowest, and iron's always going to be your lowest. So you're always looking for iron at the very end of your list. And so, for example, on Weet-Bix, I can see it written in there, mineral, and in brackets, iron. It's also got it highlighted on this panel to say, hang on a minute, look at me, I've got 3 milligrams of iron in a serving of Weet-Bix. But that's harder to understand just looking for it on the ingredient list of a breakfast cereal, because there's most Australian breakfast cereals that are processed have iron added to it these days.
Wow.
After your breakfast, yeah, it's pretty handy actually, a pretty good source in the Aussie diet. After your breakfast cereals, there's a lot of vegetarian things, but this is why the vegetarian eating is so relevant, because this is where it is on the list. It's coming slightly further down. But all your things like your beans, your chickpeas, your lentils, nuts, particularly cashews, are pretty good. Seeds. And then anything whole grain over white, so a processed product versus a whole grain. Your whole grain version's got a bit more iron in it than the white version.
Yeah. It's I'd love to share some of the tips that you've actually got in the article, and this is in particular for the client that you mentioned that she came to see you, that the young girl was iron deficient, but she'd chosen to be vegetarian. So you mentioned in the article, the tips that you mentioned for that particular client was to aim to include, this is for vegetarian children, in particular, aim to include a form of vegetarian iron at every meal. So for this particular girl, she chose to have soy burgers, dal, chickpeas, tofu, baked beans, or add cashew to her stir fry or walnuts, and to her pasta, and lots of green leafy vegetables as well, which is great. It sounds delicious. And regular snacking on other sources of iron, so hummus, nuts, dried fruit, and hard-boiled eggs, and occasional, I guess, for iron-fortified cereal, which you just mentioned earlier on before. And I loved at the start of the chat you were saying to supplement that for a vitamin C perspective is to ensure that if you can put berries and that sort of stuff in it as well to help. So that's a great idea. And you mentioned in the article to check the list of ingredients for iron-fortified cereal. So that's something I think I'm definitely going to start doing. But this is, I think, something that I guess everyone can start doing, even if we're not choosing a vegetarian diet. But to increase our iron levels is including half an orange, and or at the end of a meal, and or to squeeze the lemon on top of all of our meals, or whatever meals are sort of. I guess that it sort of works for. That's a really, really great idea. You mentioned earlier on about the tomato or capsicum. Is capsicum high in, is that iron or vitamin C?
Vitamin C.
Right. Cool. So I didn't know that. So you're saying including half an orange or some berries, tomato or capsicum with every meal, and then also to squeeze that lemon, I think. And that's something that everybody can be doing, but definitely for parents of children that are choosing to be a vegetarian, these are things that we should really start to think more of.
Definitely.
Yeah. And, and once again, as you said at the start too, I mean, when the children are healthy, it's going to enable them to be the best that they can be and to be able to be, through their schooling and through their hobbies and everything. So, and we know ourselves as women what it feels like to be iron deficient, and it's horrible. So it's just, so no one wants anyone to be able to feel like that. So now let's get stuck into question number 3. What do you do if you suspect your child has low iron levels?
So I think the symptoms we went through earlier of feeling quite tired and feeling quite pale, I would want to make sure that they actually are caused by iron deficiency, because I think they're things that have got so many other underlying causes that a trip to the GP in this case is worthwhile. So I would be going there. The risk of taking iron supplements without needing to is there, as we spoke about earlier. So your GP will be the one to work out whether or not it's warranted to get the blood test. It's obviously traumatic for younger kids, but it is valuable information. So going to the GP and making that decision about what to do next is really helpful. And then, of course, if you are low in iron, coming to a dietitian where we can go through and individualise the advice to you is really helpful. I think, though, as you were just saying, Rach, that even if you don't think your child is necessarily iron deficient now, so you're not seeing those symptoms, you can still get more iron in the diet and then help them really thrive and make sure the diet is optimal just through the changes that you and I have spoken about in this interview. So putting the breakfast cereal as a snack if it doesn't work for breakfast, having it after school, or making sure you've got those green leafy vegetables at dinner time with your capsicum at the same time. So just a couple of changes that keep your child thriving is worthwhile doing anyway. And then if you do suspect there is a problem, do see a GP and to work out where to go from there.
Yeah, you've given us some really insightful tips today, and we're really, really so grateful. And really interesting how you're just saying that you're starting to see an increased trend in this. So this is something as more children are potentially going to continue to choose vegetarianism, that we as parents, grandparents and carers really need to be aware of to ensure that their little bodies are operating at the optimum level, I would say. But if mums, dads and anyone's got any questions for you, whereabouts can they find you?
So my website is my best contact, www.baysidedietetics, dietetics.com.au. And I'm always happy to be contacted directly, and my contacts are through Kiddopedia page.
All right, sensational. Well, we're so grateful for your time today, Sarah. Can't wait to catch up again soon and give my love to the kids.
Wonderful. Thanks, Rach. See you, everybody.
Bye.